Bournemouth University and the We're Supporting Time to Change Let's End Mental Health Discrimination logos are shown. Text on screen reads, Understanding Eating Disorders, the Challenges and Opportunities by Susan Ringwood, Chief Executive of BEAT. Followed by, this video is part of the Equality and Diversity outreach work being undertaken at BU. The screen is split into 4 areas. The title at the bottom, Mental Health Awareness Week 2014, logos at the top including Bournemouth University Dorset Mental Health Forum, Dorset Healthcare NHS University NHS Foundation Trust, Richmond Fellowship, boroughofpool.com, What's Your Hunger, I Eat and BEAT, Beating Eating Disorders.
Very much. And thank you, James, for inviting me along here today. It's a really great pleasure to be here, and it's a privilege to hear from Abigail and to hear from Miranda and Simon as well. Every time I hear people talking about their own experiences, it just reminds me why it's so important that BEAT and IEAT and other organisations do the work that we're doing, because this is an illness that thrives on secrecy, and it can only flourish when it's hidden. And the more everyone can do to throw a light on that and to give an eating disorder nowhere to hide, the more likely we are to be able to overcome this really challenging condition. So I really want to congratulate those people who've spoken out, because it's not easy, and yet it makes a tremendous difference when everyone can. So
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
I'm pleased to be able to be here, and I've got a lovely assistant as well, so Sarah said she'll help me do the slides for me so that I can stand here and look at people as well. This is a very brief outline of the talk that I'm going to give. I'm going to talk a little bit about BEAT and our history and what we do, where we came from, the services we provide, and try and give you some kind of insight into the research that's going on at the moment, because we are learning more about eating disorders, what causes them, what the best treatments can be. And then finish by saying something about education, the work that BEAT's doing post and pre-16, and the opportunities that it
Slide changes and shows an image of 14 people.
exists with education. Here's a picture of the BEAT team. I always like people to see who we've got there up in Norwich. It's not everybody, but it's a representation of the people that I've got working up in Norwich. So
Slide changes,
we were formed as a
contents are
charity
read by the
in
speaker.
1989, so this is our 25th anniversary year, and I've been there for 12 of those years, so almost half of the history I've had the pleasure and privilege to be leading the charity. And we were formed when 3 local charities merged to become the first UK-wide charity for eating disorders. And we were called the Eating Disorders Association when we were first named, and that's still our legal name. But we became known as BEAT in 2007, because when I first started thinking about it, when I joined in 2002, and I thought, I didn't know anything about eating disorders then, but I thought, how likely is it that a 12 or a 14-year-old girl would say, Mummy, I think I've got a disorder, can I join this association? I thought, no, that isn't going to work, And we knew how hard it was for anyone to reach out for and ask for the help that was out there, even when they knew they needed it. And we couldn't have anything as simple as our name stand in the way. And that's why we chose BEAT as our name. And I think, again, IE is a fantastic name. It really tells people what you're standing for, and it's important that we don't use these kind of medical terms to try and describe what we're doing here. So we changed it from Eating Disorder Association, and we really
Slide changes,
BEAT.
contents are read by the speaker.
But this is our stance. This is what we believe in, and this underpins absolutely everything that we do, and it should be evident in everything we do. So we know that eating disorders are serious mental illnesses, but there are lots of people who don't know that it is a mental illness. I mean, internationally classified as a mental illness. So when I talk to people and they say, what do you do? The first thing I say is, I work for a mental health charity. And I do that. And someone go, oh right, that's, that. And then others might say, oh, so what is it? And I said, well, it's big, we work with eating disorders. And they go, oh, is that a mental health issue? So I've given people an opportunity to learn that eating disorder is a mental health charity. If I just said I work for BEAT, it's eating disorders, they might not have heard that bit about mental illness before. So I always start with that point. I work in mental health, I work with eating disorders, so they hear those two things together. We know they're multifactorial, there's not one cause, and we're learning more about it, and I can cover a little bit of that later, but there's not one single thing going on, and Miranda spoke about it, everyone's different, their journeys are different, what's led them to have this illness might be very different. Abigail said the same thing, but there are some common factors that we're beginning to explore that help us understand what's going on. We know they're treatable. Okay. it's a treatable condition and recovery is possible. People need to hear that, because some people, if they first learned about this a very long time ago, they may not have realised that we can treat this condition. It is possible to recover.
Slide changes and shows the image of a young woman with the words "ugly" written on her face.
This is a picture that was produced by one of our young ambassadors. We have young people under the age of 25 who work with us to help raise awareness and challenge stigma and help people understand the condition. And we had some money from Comic Relief to produce images that people wanted to help others understand something about how they think and feel, and to represent images other than the ones you would often see in the magazines or the newspapers, where they always show you somebody incredibly emaciated. You think that shows an eating disorder. And so I think this picture of this young woman really does sum up for so many people what it feels like to have the eating disorder. Anyone else looking at that would thinking, beautiful young girl, and yet she's convinced that she's ugly from the inside out. And we're using these pictures with their permission when we give talks, to help illustrate what we're doing.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
Just an overview of what we do: a whole range of support services, helplines and web-based support. So much more of our work now is online, so that we can reach out to people in a way that they find it easier to accept our help. Really do involve people and get them to participate in everything that's going on. So the government comes to us when they want to run a focus group with young people to find out what their views are. And we collaborate with clinicians and researchers. We don't do clinical work ourselves. We don't provide therapy, we don't provide counselling, but we work therapeutically. We work and we listen to people very actively. We encourage, motivate and support them to get the help that's out there. But we don't provide that clinical work ourselves. What we do is collaborate with those people so that we can help influence them, so they can learn much more about the patient experience and what does it feel like to have this illness, so that clinicians can understand that better. And we obviously publish literature and make sure that people are aware of what's out there in the field. And a very large part of our work is in the media and the campaigning that we're doing, where we turn to regularly for comment. Media stuff I was doing yesterday, a desperately sad case had gone to the Court of Protection, where a judge had to decide whether it was legally possible to withdraw treatment from someone who just didn't want to live. And that was a very, very difficult case to be able to have to comment on in the media yesterday, because what we know is that recovery is possible, and that instilling that hope in people that Abigail spoke about is so important. And yet for some people, their experience of this illness is so extreme that they end up feeling that they just can't believe that their life has any future at all. So, and we do know how the serious consequences of this illness. It's a mental illness, but it has physical consequences, and for some people those can be fatal. We have to
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
So, just an example of the kind of web-based support we're giving. It's through our website. We've got 50,000 unique visitors every month and 2 million hits, and most, a lot of people are there for more than 10 minutes at a time. So anybody who's working on kind of in the online world, that's a lifetime in terms of people being online. A very long time for people to be engaged in what we're offering through our website. And 40% of the people coming to our website use their mobile phones. Young people don't use their mobile phones to speak on anymore. They don't actually talk on their phones, they're using it to access other kinds of information to contact people. And most people come to us through Google or through NHS UK, or if there's a news story out there, the BBC will direct people to us. And our Get Help page is the second most visited page after the homepage, so that's what people are looking for. They want to know how can I get this.
Slide changes and shows an image of a young woman working at a computer.
Here's an example of one of my work. It's all the pictures we use in our publications on our website. They're all real live people who actually work for us, actually volunteer for us, and have actually told us that they want to be part of what we do. We don't use library pictures, and I think that's a very important part of overcoming the stigma and showing people, well, this is what it's like. We're all real pictures in our visual images. So this is one of the people providing some of our online support groups. So she's doing a live chat They're all moderated, so everything goes through the office first so that someone can see what's been said before it goes out publicly, in order to protect the vulnerable people that might be using that kind of support.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
We've got our telephones, texting and emails, and it's paid staff and volunteers working together on this, and we contacted 10,000 people last year through this service. But we know we need to increase it, so we're going to increase it by about 50%, and we're accredited with the Mental Health Helpline partnership. And we've got some new services that we want to offer to call people back and to have more live chat and one-to-one support.
Slide changes and shows an image of a young woman with a headset on.
So that's here's a helpline. So she's ready to take calls. We've seen people actually using the telephone to call us has become a much smaller part of the service we offer over the years. It was about 50% of all the contacts when I was first there in 2002 were people using the phone, and now it's less than 5% because most people come through the website or they're texting, but they actually get the phone. In the very first days, people had to telephone us and say, please can I have a leaflet? And we'd put it in the post and we'd mail it to them, and 3 days later they might get a leaflet. Now you just download it. So if you telephone us, the chances are you really want to speak to a real live person. And so the need for that call might be one that's much more challenging and more difficult, but you want to speak to a real person. So there will always be a real person there to take that call, even if it is a smaller percentage of the kind of contacts that we've...
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
And then we have support groups, much like the ones that you were talking about here at ICAP, that are volunteer-led and they're family-focused. And we do offer that skills-based training that might be something very similar that you were talking about around to helping families with caring and coping, learning how the ways that they can communicate and parent their child and the environment they create, how that can be part of overcoming the illness rather than completely unintentionally colluding with it. Nobody sets out to do that, and yet it's so counterintuitive that sometimes the things that you think would be the best thing to say inadvertently end up looking like they're the worst thing to say. And someone described this almost like Alice in Wonderland world, where everything is the opposite of what it seems on the first sight, because the worst thing you can say to someone with an eating disorder is, oh, you look well. Because that's just going to come over as I'm fat, I'm disgusting, I'm awful, I'm rotten to the core. Whereas everyone else would think that's the first thing you should say to someone who knows them well.
A slide changes and shows an image of a young woman with the words fat written on her forehead.
And here's another one of those pictures, because that's the thought that's at the front of everyone's mind for most of the time.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
We looked at the reasons why people might contact us, and about 50% of people are contacting us at the point where they've first got worries or they've had a diagnosis, either worries about themselves or a loved one, or themselves or a loved one has had a diagnosis and they just want to check it out. Are you sure this is the case? Someone's told me this, or should I do something about it? So half the contacts are at that early point. 35% of people say, well, I've been told I've got this, but what do I do now? How do I find help? Where's the best kind of help? What should I be asking for? How long will it take? Accessing treatment. And there's world-class treatment here in the UK, but it's really patchy. And it's not everywhere, and it's not good everywhere. You're extremely fortunate here with the services you have here in this part of the country. You really are. You've got some of the UK's acknowledged experts providing that treatment. But other parts of the country don't benefit from that, or might have to travel a very long way to access that help. But then 25% of people are at a point of crisis, either themselves or their families, literally not knowing where to turn or what to happen. And that percentage has grown recently. We have noted more people coming to us now in that point of crisis. And we don't know if that's because the access to treatment is getting more difficult, people are having to wait longer to get help, they're not being seen soon enough, but for some reason we're seeing more people coming to us at the point where they are really quite desperate. And so we've had to alter and change some of the services to make them much more accessible and appropriate to people who might be at that point.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
Just a little snapshot here of some of the definitions about eating disorders, and if you look it up, they're internationally recognised as illnesses. There are diagnostic manuals that set them out, and the description for an eating disorder in that international diagnostic manual says morbid preoccupation with weight and shape. That's the official definition of what an eating disorder is. And you notice it doesn't mention food at all. It doesn't mention eating. You know, that's what one of the things that Abigail said, it isn't the food, it's the preoccupation with weight and shape that is what's driving the illness, and the food is what happens when you have this concern. So that's the simple definition. It is serious mental illness. It has got those physical consequences. It's unusual in an illness that it has it's a physical harm that can happen to the body when you have this mental illness that makes it perhaps so challenging to treat. Because our healthcare system is divided between physical, medical help and psychiatric, psychological help. There are different hospitals, there are different doctors, there are different systems, and yet this person has this condition that is affecting them physically and mentally, and somehow, you know, treating them holistically seems to be very challenging for the way our healthcare system is organised at the moment. Because we've got this unnatural divide between what's going on with our physical body and what's going on with our mental well-being. Hopefully we can, you know, keep pushing for those to be much more integrated and to understand. And some of the government policy around ensuring parity, treating people equally, parity between mental and physical health. You know, they're making policy statements about that now. That's a welcome move. The Royal College of Psychiatrists and the Royal College of GPs have both signed an agreement that says they will each take the other into account. You know, small steps, but they're very important ones to getting the people out there who know how to treat us, talking to each other about so they can treat us as a whole person. But we do know it has this very high mortality rate at the moment. And I know that no one needs to die of an eating disorder. It is a treatable illness. There are some physical illnesses which, with the best will in the world, we don't yet know how to treat them successfully. There are some cancers that they will take your life. Every intervention may not be successful. Eating disorder isn't in that category. It is treatable, and yet, right now, too many precious lives are still. The physical consequences are high, but so is the rate of suicide. Very high in eating disorders, much higher than the general population, and people who, once they realise how ill they are, can't imagine how they could change their life. Don't reach that turning point that Abigail was able to reach and feel, I know I don't want this life, I can't imagine how my life could be different, and so they can end up taking that life. And that's tragic. We know that anorexia nervosa is the rarest of the eating disorders. It's the one that people perhaps think about most often, but it's only about 15% of cases. So if you look at eating disorders as a whole, about 15% of those cases would be anorexia nervosa. And perhaps 40% are bulimia nervosa. And the rest would be binge eating disorder, where someone might eat large amounts of food but not purge themselves. And that's very rarely seen in younger people, and has only very recently been accepted as an officially recognised diagnosis. But you know, that's how the condition spread across the whole piece. Some people are saying we should maybe look at eating disorders as a spectrum. They're not different disorders. They are a continuum. At one end you might have very restricting anorexia, at the other you might have compulsive overeating, and they have more in common than they are separate. It's a view. Some clinicians and researchers are holding that. Others are saying, no, they are very different, and particularly the anorexia is so different that you can't treat it the same as the others. So in terms of the research world, there are some people taking what they call a trans-diagnostic approach, looking at it right across the piece. Others are saying, no, we do need to keep them separate. We do need to...
Slide changes, content are read by the speaker.
Are they getting worse? I mean, I say I do work in the media, and this is often the first question I'm asked, is it getting worse? Well, we don't know. The best data we've got says there are 1.6 million people in the UK who could be directly affected by an eating disorder. But the government doesn't gather that information. GPs don't have to report how many cases they've seen. And we know there are lots of people who are unwell and well enough to have a diagnosis, they've never yet been to see their GP if they're not in the system. 40% of those people who contact us have not yet spoken to a healthcare professional. They won't be on anybody's list. So we know that there are perhaps many more people affected than could be counted in anybody's statistics. We do know that 80% of the new cases, this case is someone who's been diagnosed by a professional, 80% of new cases are young women between the ages of 12 and 20. But it can be anyone at any age. It can be boys and men, it can be adults, and it can be children younger than the age of 12 too. We have seen cases of 8, which is very young indeed.
Slide changes contents are read by the speaker.
So what causes it? That's another question I'm frequently asked. If you remember an early slide, I said it's multifactorial. We know that there are a whole number of factors that need to be in play before any one person might become at risk of developing this illness. There's not just one thing happening here. But what we're learning is so much more of it is hardwired and biological than was thought to be the case until even quite recently, when it was previously thought it perhaps was all about society, perhaps it was all about parents. We know that's not the case. Parents don't cause eating disorders, they absolutely don't. But we do know that there are, let's say, hardwired and biological factors involved. And one of these is the structure of our genes, genetics. Research going into this right now to find out, is there something in the structure of our genes that makes some people susceptible to developing an eating disorder? But because genetic is not exactly the same as inherited, you have to hear that. If something has a genetic factor, it doesn't mean it's necessarily passed on through the generations. There are genetic conditions. Down syndrome is one, it's genetic, it's not inherited. Okay? So they're not equivalent terms. I'm not going to be terribly scientific here because I don't have any scientific training, but it's almost like a spontaneous kink. Kink's not a genetic term, but something spontaneous can happen in the expression of our gene that means a condition can develop or a vulnerability can develop. It hasn't been passed on from the family. We know that there are personality types that seem to make people more at risk, and perfectionism is absolutely up there. We know that people who have a drive for perfectionism and a need for control, but at the same time have low self-esteem, that seems to be the most toxic mix. Perfectionism, control, and then low self-esteem. But we also know that back to our genes, we know they're more malleable and plastic than we thought was the case until recently. They are influenced by the environment we find ourselves in. Those genes, they call them expressed. Genes are expressed when they meet the environment. We have a latency in our genes, and some of that is chemical. If we're in a toxic chemical environment, those genes might express themselves. We're learning the same thing might be true of our social cultural environment. There may be some things about it that are toxic, that some people have a genetic risk for finding themselves vulnerable in that environment, and there's interesting research linking into that. But we know the personality type is part of it. And so there's something about brain chemistry, and very interesting research looking at the role of adrenaline on the brain. We know that people with an eating disorder can be very anxious. They seem to be much more anxious than others who don't have an eating disorder. And people have looked at the chemistry of their brain and found that they are much, much more susceptible to the role of adrenaline on their brain than people who don't have an eating disorder. Okay, now adrenaline helps us fight or flight. You know, we know how we're going to stand up or we're going to run away. And if you've got very, very high levels of the hormone adrenaline in your brain, then you may be experiencing higher levels of anxiety than someone who doesn't have high levels of adrenaline. And we don't know what's caused that. We don't know enough about people who've got high adrenaline levels who don't develop anorexia to know which came first. But we know it's a feature. We know it's a feature to look at. What we do know is that adrenaline, like lots of hormones, can only pass from the blood to the brain. Hormones go through the blood-brain barrier, soluble in fat. That's how hormones reach our brain and impact on our brain. If you reduce the fat in your body, you can turn off the adrenaline switch. Okay? The adrenaline does not reach the brain if you've got very little fat in your body. People are probably self-medicating. They don't know. They're 12 years old. The only way they can turn off this adrenaline anxiety switch in their brain is to lower the fat in their bodies. It's a partial explanation. It's not the whole picture. Because when people talk about their experience of what it's like to have the eating disorder, they don't experience it as an illness. That's what's another bit of the Alice in Wonderland world. It's the answer. It's not the problem. They feel safe. They feel calm. They feel in control. And those are all things you feel when you're not feeling anxiety. You've turned the anxiety switch off because the adrenaline hasn't reached your brain. And the first thing everybody wants you to do is feed and eat and gain weight, and when you do and the fat hits your brain, the switch goes back on and you're anxious again. And why would you do that? You're 12. Okay, so there's a lot of biology going on here, and we're learning so much more about it. And it may be, we're a long way from this, it may be that if we learn more about this chemistry of the brain, we may be able to develop some drug therapies that help balance that chemistry in the brain in the future in the way that antidepressants can be very successful for some people who have a tendency to that, and drugs can help them. There are no drugs right now that help with eating disorders. For some people, if they also have very low mood, antidepressant can help them benefit from psychological therapy. But the antidepressant itself doesn't treat the eating disorder. There isn't any treatment out there right now that's based on drugs. There may be if we learn more about how our brains are working. We do know that life events are part of the picture. Abigail spoke very courageously about her own situation and how that could have been part of her picture as well. We know that early bereavement is a factor. We know that abuse is certainly a factor, both physical and sexual abuse. It isn't the case for everyone. And it was thought until quite recently that absolutely everybody must have been abused, otherwise they wouldn't develop an eating disorder. That isn't true, it is for some. But thinking that it must be everybody has led some families to feel particularly reluctant to tell anybody because they would imagine everybody must therefore think I must have abused my child, otherwise they wouldn't have developed an eating disorder. That isn't the case. There are people, including healthcare professionals, who still think that is the case. So they may be having that in their mind. It's not true. We know that bullying is a factor as well, and it doesn't have to be bullying about weight and shape, just bullying per se, because it lowers that self-esteem. And if you remember, the perfectionism, the control, and the low self-esteem are risk factors. So anything that lowers your self-esteem can raise the risk if you have these other hardwired vulnerabilities as part of your makeup. And then finally, we have got that social context. We've got the media influences, we've got the aesthetic that says you have to be as young and tall and thin and blonde as impossible to be seen as successful. The celebrity culture, advertising, they're all part of the noise. They don't by themselves cause the eating disorder. But for me, the good news is they're the part of the world that we can influence and change. Our genetics, our brain even our brain chemistry, our genetics, I'm not advocating genetic engineering, but I am advocating social change that works on that culture. That's the bit that we can mediate. And if we can reduce that risk, then there's so much more we can do to help even those people who are hardwired be less vulnerable to this environment.
Slide changes and shows an image of a young person with the words "why" written on their back.
So we're learning a bit more about the why, but we don't know all the history yet. But we're learning as much as we can.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
So now I'm going to finish by just talking about the work that we're doing in schools. We worked 110,000 secondary pupils attended a BEAT session in school last year, which we're really proud of that. We were given money from Dove, which is the Unilever brand, to be able to provide this work free for schools. And that's carrying on. So if any of you know about secondary schools who would like to access this, come to our site or the Dove site and we'll find out how to do that. And this is about body-related self-esteem and resilience and understanding the role of the media. It doesn't actually talk about eating disorders per se. It's much more about, building that underlying resilience that benefits everybody, including those who might be at risk of eating disorder. And we've got great feedback from staff and from pupils, and particularly the staff. We hadn't ever imagined that this intervention would have an effect on the staff in the schools. But they're coming back and saying that it's really made me conscious about my own body image and the fact that I know that I need to be able to represent positive regard for myself when I'm standing in the classroom. Teachers are mostly young female staff actually, in the whole, particularly in this age range we're talking about, and they are literally embodied. Their body is in that room all day, every day, delivering those sessions, no matter what their subject is. And so that's an ideal opportunity for them to be able to demonstrate to the young people in their charge what it's like to really demonstrate positive self-esteem and positive regard for your body. And we got shortlisted for a national award for this work, so I was really pleased about it.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
In terms of schools, these are some of the risk factors that we make sure that we tell schools about, because these are all things that can have an impact on your body-related self-esteem. And each one can seem fairly kind of harmless in isolation, but if you add them together, they can take quite a cumulative toll on people. And fat teasing, I mean, it sounds like it's just, well, that can't be very important, can it? But actually, we know that the risk for people who have young children who have been bullied, even if they're not overweight, can be enough. And again, Abigail talked about that. Body-related jibes can have a disproportionate effect on prepubescent children. So children who are beginning to develop the adult body and might have insecurities about it. And for some reason, we don't know, young boys who are overweight and bullied for that weight have a much greater risk of developing anorexia than girls do who are bullied for weight. So there's something about the boys and the insecurity about the body that we're noticing now as a risk as well. That body checking that goes on, and it was something that Miranda said, how do you answer that question? We all inadvertently send out that, does my bum look big in this? I mean, have you ever heard anybody say, do my legs look too long in this? I mean, they don't do that, do they? We only ever draw attention to those parts of our body that are meant to be rounded and soft, and those are the ones that we find so uncomfortable. So think about how we have those conversations. And dieting as well. Every single eating disorder starts with a diet. It absolutely does. And children shouldn't be on a diet unless medically supervised. Children should be gaining weight right through their childhood until they reach their full adult weight. There is, unless medically supervised, children shouldn't be on the diet. And yet, it's such an important, such a prevalent part of everyone's life now to feel that they should be on the diet. And every single popular magazine and press that you find is absolutely full of those messages. Diets don't work. If they did, you'd only need to do it once. All they do is prime your brain to have a kind of screwed up reward mechanism that makes you more likely to develop the eating disorder as well. So, let's say, take that message, children shouldn't be on a diet, they should be gaining weight. Those of you who've had children know that when you first have your babies, they show you those charts and you're always measuring where are you on that chart, Actually, those charts carry on and medical professionals use them. They carry on to adult life. They tend not to show them to us after we've got to about the age of 5 or something and there's no longer health history there. But there is a chart that shows how adults should continue, children and adolescents should continue to gain weight, to stay on that graph. Bad food. Again, we spoke about. The only bad food is the food that's gone off. Okay? There are no bad foods. It's about learning how to enjoy foods in their moderation and for what they are, and the pleasure that you have from them, and being mindful about it. So there are no bad foods. You can't just live off lettuce any more than you can just live off chocolate. But avoiding them, thinking that they're bad, is going to be a harmful part of our attitude that can get so self-destructive for some people. And at its most extreme, we see body loathing. And in a school, you might notice this, the person who might appear in the photograph, who's always at the back of the room, who won't bring themselves forward. In the sports lessons, they're hiding their body. You might notice that. But you also notice that in the staff too.
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
Fortunately, there are lots of positive factors too. And we know that praise and encouragement can be a real motivation for people. But choose the time and choose the subject. Really like what Miranda said about, sitting around the dinner table is not the time to have this conversation, because that's when the anxiety level is going to be extraordinarily high. But another time, another place to give that praise and encouragement can be really, really reinforcing. Helping young people understand what their growing bodies should be like and that it's natural for them. We know that the issue of childhood obesity, that's everybody's rightly concerned about young people's health and well-being, and yet some of the messages that go out about that are inadvertently unhelpful for the people that we're concerned about. Eat less and exercise more is not a message that you have to give someone with anorexia. But we also know that children are attaining a heavier weight earlier, and they're therefore entering puberty earlier. Puberty is driven by weight. 42 kilos and you're in. That's how it works. About 7 stone. Okay? And if now children are getting heavier earlier, they're entering puberty earlier. We're seeing it in primary schools. And the hormonal and psychological changes associated with puberty start 2 years ahead of the physical signs. So those 8 and 9-year-olds are starting down this process. Their bodies are changing much younger, and they don't have the psychological preparedness for it. And so that is a direct effect of children gaining, becoming heavier earlier, is that they're entering puberty earlier, and the average age of puberty has dropped by 5 years in the last 50. That's phenomenal in evolutionary terms. Absolutely phenomenal. Okay? It used to be 16, 17, and we're now looking 11, 12. And some obviously outliers earlier than that. And that's driven by weight. So helping people understand that growing body and what it means for them is an important part of it. Having that positive regard for yourself and your colleagues, and the communication that we heard about, how important it is to get that communication right. And I think the last part is, chips and chocolate have absolutely no place in all of our lives. And it's important that we understand.
Slight changes shows an image of a young woman with the words failure written on her stomach.
But we know that people can change failure. I mean, it's a no-win job sometimes for families, and in the schools as well. They can feel like it is absolutely their fault, and it isn't. It's much.
Slight changes contents are read by the speaker.
Briefly want to talk about some work we did with the Girl Guides. Am I okay for another 2 minutes? We did this with Girl Guides and actually brownies, and it was 7, 8 and 9-year-olds, and they were shown drawings of girls in the same age as them, but a range of sizes, not extreme, but they included slender girls and larger girls. And they were asked to talk about these girls, what kind of girls are they, and where would they live? Would they live on Planet Happy or Planet Sad? And the things they said were recorded and analysed by researchers who are skilled in drawing that kind of analysis. And what these little brownies said, absolutely starkly, was that the picture of the girl who was the most slender, they said, she's definitely on Planet Happy, she's successful, I want to be her friend, she's good at games, the teachers would like her, I'd be proud to be seen with her. The girl that was large, she's on Planet Sad, she's lonely, they said she's bullied, some said I wouldn't want to play with her, she wouldn't be good at things, the teachers wouldn't like her, some even said she was lazy. They were 7, and they knew that the size and shape of your body told the whole world what kind of person you are. They had internalised that message so strongly. I'd say that it was completely black and white. But because they were parents, they also said, but we know it's what's on the inside that counts. Back to that present. It's what so I'm on a mission to say we should all channel our inner brownie, because it is what's on the inside that counts, and we need to hold that thought. And if I may, I'm going to take that thing about having the present, and yes, the wrapping looks nice, but we all know what's inside, because that's my take-home message for today.
Slight changes contents are read by the speaker.
Really briefly, I'm not going to say very much about this, but I'm more than happy for anyone to contact me if this is what you want to do. When we're looking at education, we're advocating a whole school approach, so it's not about drawing out those people in your class who you might think might have a problem. You need to work right across the curriculum, right across the school, because that's the best way to build resilience in the whole of the pupil population. And there are lots of areas of the curriculum where this can make a difference, not just the person's social health education, where you typically talk about sort of issues, but media, culture, sports, all kinds of areas where this can come up and can be addressed in a natural way. And it's making sure that the support and information is available there for everyone, for parents and for staff as well.
Slight changes contents are read by the speaker.
And then, lastly, about what happens post-16, we talked about, other people mentioned this, that transition, moving from home, going to college, joining a new group, being, no longer having the access to those support networks that might have been there previously. The competitiveness and the perfectionism may rear their heads again because you're now in an environment where that kind of achievement has much more of a spotlight on it, and it means more to you to be able to be successful in that area. And we know that the pastoral care and other support networks aren't always as well developed as they are here in your university, where you have very good student services available, but that isn't always the case. And if someone is already in treatment, being able to maintain support with the people providing the treatment team who may be in another part of the country. When parents or when students come to us concerned about how can they, get the most out of university life at the same time as recover from their eating disorder, we always tell them to prioritise their health. You can prioritise your health. You should choose that, because nowadays education is still going to be there. But get well first, and then take up your education opportunities. Because we're talking about probably a high-achieving person who will be motivated to want to get well enough to get back into the academic world. And so prioritise your health is the best message to give people.
Slide changes and reads, preparing to help pastoral care health professionals, the student themselves, their parents.
And I think I've said
Slide changes, contents are read by the speaker.
So the key challenges that we've got here is we know we need to reach out to more people at the point where the kind of help we can give them is the most useful, and that's as early as possible. We need to keep our own focus as an organisation because there is so much to be done. We're still a small charity, for all we're the only national charity, and we did reach over 500,000 people last year, which is phenomenal, but that's still not everybody. We've got to keep responsive to those needs of people, close to learning from people, telling us what they want to hear, and really make their views count, and get them heard. And that's what we're driven to do in everything we do at Beat.
Slide changes to show contact details, www.b-eat.co.uk, helpline 0845 634 1414, facebook.com/beating.eating.disorders, at beateds.ringwood@b-eat.co.uk.
Those are all our details, and I'm happy to share those with anybody. And that's my personal email at the bottom, and I'm always very happy to take a personal contact for anybody that I've spoken to who wants to be able to get in touch with us.
Slide changes to show the words socket to eating disorders with an image of 2 socks.
Little plug for Socket. So if you come and put anybody, and now people here have done it, Socket to Eating Disorders. It's a fundraising campaign. It's a simple message that people can socket to eating disorders, but it came from a very sad and profound place. And I was speaking at an international conference in Salzburg in Austria, and one of the speakers about to get on the stage was a woman called Kitty Weston from Minnesota, and her daughter Anna had taken her own life 10 years previously from her eating disorder. And Kitty was about to speak about this to a conference of almost 1,000 healthcare professionals from all around the world. And she's good at it, but she was getting ready to have this talk. And just before she got on the stage, we heard that the daughter of another friend of ours, a girl called Erin, had just been found dead, and she'd been dead for 3 days before we found her. And Kitty was distraught, and we were trying to comfort her as best we could. And another friend, a woman from Australia, a woman called June Alexander, who'd been ill with anorexia for 40 years, and then suddenly went, do you know what, I'm choosing life, and went for it hell for leather. She's a force of nature. June fetched in her pocket, and out came a sock that belonged to her own daughter, that happened to have travelled all the way from Adelaide to Salzburg, and she didn't know what this sock was doing in her pocket, but there it was. And she handed it to Kitty, who wiped her eyes, blew her nose on the sock, put it in her pocket, got on the stage, and took that conference to bits with the way she spoke. And that night, when we were all in a vehicle, I think, kind of having a bit of a wake for Erin, we said, this sock is a sign. And we're not all people of faith, but those of us who are said it's a sign. And we're going to take this sign, and we're going to make it count. And so that's what's behind Socket. It's Erin's sock. And we're determined to try and do something with that message. And you don't even have to know about Erin, and you don't even have to know that a girl died to make that possible, to be part of helping us beat eating disorders. But I just want to end by thanking you with some pictures from our young ambassador.
Slide changes shows 3 people holding a card that says thank you. Dr. James Parkman K talks off
There are
camera.
email addresses, so if anyone wants to approach anyone afterwards, they can. Clearly, speakers are still here as well, so clearly that can be done after we close. But I'd like to say a big thank you to Abby, Miranda, and Simon in his absence, and Susan. Thank you again.
Screen fades to black with the text. If you would like to find out more about the dignity, diversity and equality work at the university, please contact Dr. James Palfman K, Equality and Diversity Advisor, email diversity@bournemouth.ac.uk, www.bournemouth.ac.uk/diversity, followed by the Bournemouth University logo.